Okay, there we go. So I was Googling University of Utah and I was captivated by this photograph of the mountains with some snow on them. And I got to see in real life some mountains with some snow on them. Here's my info. Um, so I started teaching. I was a brand new, newly minted PhD assistant professor in the classics department at the University of Georgia in 1980. So I've been there a long time. I retired after 44 years, wearing several different hats. And then sort of like I retired June 1st. Took a lot of naps, read a lot of trashy books, never got out of my pajamas. And on June 30th, I said, well, that was fun. Now what I'm going to do. This opportunity to direct the governor's Teaching Fellows program came up, and I jumped at the chance because I love talking to faculty, and I love solving problems, and I love helping faculty up their game in the classroom to whatever extent I can. So the Governor's Teaching Fellows Program, it's hosted by the University of Georgia, but it's actually funded by the governor. So we invite applications from higher education instructors all across the state of Georgia, public and private. We have a cohort of 16 every academic year. They meet on campus 6 times a year for a 3-day workshop. And we talk about teaching. And we talk about course design. They're outstanding people, and so it's a tremendous amount of fun. We also have a very intensive 1-week program in May that practically kills me. For the second year in a row, we're going to do AI in the holistic classroom because we need to wrap our arms around this and figure out where we stand on that whole issue. So, Chase gave me a title which I didn't like, and so I have changed the title to Riding the Wave of Change, the faculty as agents of student success. So, we all know we're in the midst of tremendous change, right? No big deal. We understand that. That's where we are. That's where we're going to be change is always happening. So, I reinvented myself as a faculty member at least 3 different times in my 44 years of teaching in the classroom. It's like, you have to because your students are different. And the students who are coming to the university now are a very different breed of student than the ones we saw even 10 years ago. So if you don't ride that wave of change, you're either going to, fail your students, or, and this is what motivated me, you're going to bore yourself to death. And so I found myself boring myself to death in the classroom. And so I just started changing and sort of approaching teaching in a totally different way. So I'd like to know who's in the room. So how many of you are staff? How many of you are faculty? Okay, so I anticipated talking to a lot of faculty, So the real focus on this is faculty. So take what you can use and talk to your faculty friends and say, hey, I just heard this interesting talk about faculty as agents for student success. So we won't bother. We'll just move on. Okay, so what is student success? The answer, of course, depends on, who's answering the question. So if you're an administrator in higher ed, an upper administrator in higher ed, or if you're an employer, these are probably the things that are going to come immediately to mind. You ask any upper administrator about student success, and they'll start blathering about retention, progression, and completion. Now, I'm not saying that's not important, but it's not where faculty are. It's where administrators are because it's a good metric. And it's a metric that's easy to get at, as opposed to much more oblique metrics like, are your students being successful? Well, they're graduating. Now, whether or not they're successful is a different question altogether. And that's what we're charged as faculty and as staff to help our students succeed. I like this image because there's that big gap, the stairs that aren't quite there. How do you get those students up those stairs in a continuous pathway instead of letting them get stymied somewhere near the beginning and not progress and not complete? If you're an administrator, you think about enrollment, the antidote to the demographic cliff that's coming. If we can't demonstrate that our students are successful, how are we going to continue to invite them into higher education? Especially considering the fact that, in our current situation, so many Americans really are not sure what the value of higher ed is. We know its value, but we have to demonstrate that value to other audiences, some of whom are determined it's a waste of somebody's time and a waste of their money. Those of us in public institutions, we have to serve the entire state, right? So we cannot live in some kind of isolated ivory tower. We have to recruit the first-gen students, the rural students, the students who are parents, the students who are traditionally underserved by higher ed. We've got to recruit them, but if they don't complete, then we have failed. Or even if they complete, if they're as hapless when they graduate as they were when they came in, we failed. And it's our responsibility not to have that failure. If you're an employer, you want real world skills, right? You've all seen the list of what employers are looking for. They're looking for people who can communicate, both orally and written. They want people who can collaborate. They want people who are creative. We don't have any metrics on that. So many faculty think that teaching students how to write belongs in first-year comp. They're going to learn how to write in one semester or maybe 2 semesters of freshman comp, and that's just supply whatever words you want. It's nonsense, it's crap, it's not the answer. Students need to write all the time in every class. I don't care if you're teaching chemistry. You need to give your students an opportunity to write so they can hone that skills. I mean, we all, many of us wrote PhD dissertations or have published articles. And I mean, how many revisions did we go through? Writing is a learning process. Students need to write. Students need to communicate a lot in class with their peers and with others so that they can, in fact, explain what they know. Employers are constantly complaining about the fact we call these high-achieving students in for job interviews, and they're like, they can't talk to anybody else. They just don't know how to do it. And so I say it's part of our responsibility to make sure that when they graduate, they have a lot of these real world skills. Now, if the person answering the question is faculty, you're going to get a whole different range of answers. So let's do a little experiment here. I want you to take a minute to think about how you answer the question, what is student success? So go ahead, if you want to write, writing is always good, or just think about it. Those of you who are not faculty but staff, you have a role to play. Think about what your role is, or think about how you would define student success, because it's a pretty nebulous term. You look it up and, it's like 9,000 different definitions of what student success is. Okay, so think. Anybody want to share with the room some things that popped up in your, in your thinking, in your discussion? Anything to share? Yes.
We talked about creative problem solving or critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's high up on the employer's wish list as well. And, we all say we're teaching critical thinking, but are we actually? In the same way that we constantly say that we are producing lifelong learners, are we? Other things to share with the group. Yes?
Mine's very basic, but I think just excitement, having the students be excited about what they're learning, wanting to continue to learn.
Yeah.
To learn 10 years of post-graduation, I think that's a win. To see that
You're a man after my own heart. Thank you. That's pretty much my definition. I saw another hand go up. Yes.
Helping students meet their goals, whatever those goals may be.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Another important facet of my definition. Anything else to share? Yes.
I think for me, student success is helping students navigate a pretty complex
Yes.
situation while also trying to help them meet their goals in a timely manner.
Yeah, and I mean, yes. And that's hard to do, especially in your first semester, especially if you are rural or if you are first gen. You don't have those family models. You don't have people to ask. I mean, Chase and I started a big rural initiative at UGA, and we discovered that, these students were coming from towns that didn't have a bus system. The bus system on our campus is second only to the public transportation system in Atlanta. how were they supposed to navigate all of that? So navigating the campus space and navigating the complexity of acquiring their education is very difficult, especially for those kinds of students. That was all great. So what I suggest now is, carry that conversation with you in your head and think in particular about your role and how your role should be contributing to student success here at the U. Notice how I slipped the U in, because I've gotten used to that's how you all refer to it. So, yay me! Okay, so faculty as agents of student success. You're kidding me, right? Look at all of the hats faculty already wear, and that's a pretty limited list. We could all add additional hats that faculty wear, and now we're saying turn faculty into agents of student success. It's like, no wonder so many faculty are frustrated and overwhelmed and overburdened. Every year, our job gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we often feel less and less able to manage all of the demands on us. But what I think is true is that, yeah, we're asking faculty to wear another hat, but remember when I said I was boring myself in my own classes? I no longer bore myself because I'm focusing more on the student and how that student is going to use that content and remember that content and become passionate about that content several years down the road. And that has changed the way I teach forever. And so I no longer bore myself. Instead, I keep my eyes on my students. They tell me what, you can read a room. You know who's engaged, who's not engaged, and it's not so bad. So, Chase told me 10 things faculty should do for student success. So, here are, I think that's probably more than 10. If I talked about each one of them individually, we'd be here all day. So, getting students to that success, helping them reach their goals that they have, helping them acquire lifelong skills that are going to make their post-university career more productive. It's hard. So it's an uphill battle. But the curve is much steeper for students than it is for us. So I want to talk about relationship-driven teaching first. Chase and I talk about this all the time. We also do a fair amount of gossiping and laughing, but we talk a lot about relationship-driven teaching. There's a ton of research out there that, children growing up, frequently the difference between productive childhood and not is the one caring person in that child's life. There's research that shows the same is true at the university level, the one caring professor can make a huge difference. So, I stopped thinking about a hierarchical relationship where I was in charge and I expected them to do whatever I told them to do, regardless of how ridiculous it may have seemed to them. And I switched to sort of, it's a two-way street. We each contribute to this, and we end up being better for that. We listen to our students. We trust them. We meet them where they are. Most of them are not going to go on to get a PhD and become faculty members. It could be the gen ed course that they have to take, that they don't want to take. You've got to sort of understand who your students are. You need to ask your students what they need or what they want or what they expect. If we really want students to own their own learning, we have to ask them, what is it that you want? What are you nervous about in this course that I can help you with? Ask your students some questions about themselves. Now, there are lots of different ways to do this. I think having some demographic knowledge about your students is very important, because the struggle that a first-gen student has will be very different than the struggle that a student who came from an elite private high school will have. They'll both have problems and challenges, but they will be very different. So I think demographic information is key. And I would point you to the work of Jody Green at the University of California at Santa Cruz, who has a dashboard so faculty can see certain demographic information about their students. We have to be judicious, obviously, but those kinds of things are important. Remember that each student is more than their major. I'm so sick of you meet a student that you don't previously know, and the first question is, oh, what are you majoring in? As if that's the only thing they are. If I could banish one question from the world, it would be, what's your major? Because their major is just a tiny piece of who they are. They are themselves. And so, again, we have to meet them where they are. What are they interested in already? What are they already passionate about? Can I tap into their passion for anime, for example? Can I somehow tap into that interest and connect it to my class on classical archaeology? When I do that, then they can start to see a bigger horizon and understand that, okay, well, I thought this was a gen ed course that I wasn't interested in, but it turns out I am interested in it. What excites or worries them about the course? You need to try to get them to tell you those kinds of things. Is there something about themselves in particular they want you to know? Now, I think asking these kinds of questions on a questionnaire is not the best strategy. I think these are questions that have to be answered over the lifetime of the course as you build that trust and students feel free to come to you and talk to you and tell you about their passions, their dreams, what their goals are, or that they don't yet have any goals. And how can you help them find those goals? Tap into their own passions. So, again, I find that something that helps that process, so you don't fill out a questionnaire where they leave all the things blank, is to adopt something like UGA's Relentless Welcome program, which didn't start very long ago. I think it's maybe only 3 years old, but it's really fantastic. As soon as it came up, I signed up. You know, it's like just a few simple steps can help create the atmosphere in class where students will be more open, they'll talk to you, and you'll learn fascinating things about them. So here are the 3 things. Learn and use the names of at least 2 students a week for 3 weeks. Now, if you're teaching a class that has 150 students in it, you're going to have to modify that a little bit. But, you know, don't just do it for the first 3 weeks. I now do it all semester long. Ask one student how their day is going. Stop to really listen to the answer. It's like, you know, how are you today? I'm fine. We all do that. That's not productive. Stop to really listen and ask a follow-up question so they know you've heard them and that you're open to a dialogue with them about what's going on in their life. Change the name of office hours to student drop-in hours. A lot of research that students don't know what office hours are. Many students think that's when you're in your office and you should not be bothered. So long ago, you know, I changed the name of office hours because I would sit there and nobody would come. And I thought, well, I'm a nice person. Why aren't they coming to talk to me? So just some change in semantics can result in some real rewards. So this Relentless Welcome program sort of came out of a talk that Peter Felton gave at UGA that was derived from his book, Relationship-Rich Education, How Human Connections Drive Success in College. And one of the primary points of that book is every student must experience genuine welcome and deep care. Now, I'm not asking you to turn into their mothers and their fathers, but I'm asking you to listen to your students and try to understand who they are. So, the syllabus. Oh my God, the syllabus. The bane of my existence. If you design your course and you start with the syllabus, you're already off to a terrible start. You need to start with those blue sky dreams, which is what you were talking about. What is it that you want your students to know? So, you know, I'm a classical archaeologist, which means I study ancient Greeks and Romans. I no longer care if my students can tell me where or when the Parthenon was built. What I care about is, do they understand the cultural differences between that world and our own? Can they recognize the similarities? Can they use the study of antiquity to help understand our world and to help understand themselves? That's where I start, and then I move backwards from there. And the very last thing is create that syllabus. So, right? This sounds all too familiar. When I first started teaching in 1980, I was 26 years old. And I'm short. And I looked considerably younger than every single student in my classes. And so I thought what I needed to do was make them realize that I was their instructor and not their friend. And so I look back at my first syllabi and, oh my God, they are so embarrassing. And for the first 10 or 12 years of teaching, my syllabus got longer and longer and meaner and meaner and more punitive and more punitive. And I look at those syllabi now and I think to myself, I wouldn't want to take that course with that woman who sounds awful in her syllabus. So I switched it up, and, doesn't take a lot. But now I have a preamble to my syllabus because I still teach a first year experience course every fall. Sometimes you're experiencing a course, blah, 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 blah. Please tell me both what you need to know before you feel confident that you'll succeed, and let me know how I can help you. Just a sort of welcoming tone. I got rid of all of the punitive language. I got rid of the meanness, and it has been a very long struggle over the last 10 years to get more UGA faculty to detoxify their syllabus. And then, since I believe in relationship-driven teaching, I tell them a little bit about myself, what I'm passionate about, and why I'm still in the classroom after 44 years. I love teaching. I love students. I love helping students, in the hopes that this kind of message will go a long way towards them feeling comfortable in my class and asking questions. So many students don't ever want to ask a question because they don't want to seem stupid. This is not a best practice. We all know, do you remember that movie, The Paper Chase, where the professor said essentially the same thing? And many faculty in covert ways are sending that message in their syllabus. So some best practices. Post your syllabus online before the semester begins. I don't know if it's policy here, but students have a right to know what they're signing up for. Get that syllabus up there. And if you dramatically change the syllabus, make sure that whatever is online is current and meets your current philosophy. Please do not go over the syllabus on the first day of class. That will kill any enthusiasm that anybody has for anything you're going to say in the 15 weeks subsequent to that. Stop that. Keep it short. Before I changed my syllabus, it was like 14 pages long. Well, so no student is going to read 14 pages of rules and regulations and punishments and timetables and what's going to happen to them if they don't turn their work in on time, blah, 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 blah. Those kinds of conversations can come up as needed when you make your first assignment. Keep the syllabus short in the hopes that they will, in fact, actually read it. Make it welcoming. Don't use a syllabus like I did. A simple thing of using you in the syllabus as opposed to the student will learn. In this course, students will learn. That's a whole different sentence from in this class, you will learn. You will do. You will interpret. You will analyze. Draw those students in to that relationship with you from the very beginning and make that message over and over again, not only verbally, but in your syllabus. Another thing to consider, students' fear of failure. This is, I think, huge, and I think it's something that we know exists, but we don't do much about it. So take a minute to think of what you currently do to try to mitigate that fear, or do you ignore that fear? Just kind of, I'm going to give you a minute to reflect. So reflect away. So here are some options, some things that you could do to help mitigate that fear. And fear and anxiety often go hand in glove in the classroom, and fear and anxiety and then cheating often becomes a straight line path for students. So let's see if we can handle the fear before it leads to that stress and anxiety and cheating, because that's what happens. So, graded versus ungraded assignments. It never occurred to me when I first started teaching that I could give them assignments to do and I didn't have to grade them. Not only is it good for them, but oh God, it was really good for me. I didn't have to grade those things. That's important. Have a mix of things that are graded, things that are self-graded, and things that are not graded at all. You get a check because you did it. I have students grade a lot of their own work, especially when I'm teaching an ancient Greek class, because that becomes an opportunity for them. They take the quiz. I then talk about the correct answer. They look at their answer, and we have a dialogue about the correct answer versus the incorrect answer. So you're getting them to learn two different times, both preparing for the quiz and then grading that quiz afterwards. Exam wrappers. I've never actually used this myself, but I have a colleague in one of those chemistry 1 classes with 250 students in it, where they take the exam and, nobody passed. I mean, first year chemistry is just a nightmare on every single campus across the country, as far as I can tell. So they take their test, and then the faculty member devotes the very next day to talking about the test and to talking about correct answers versus incorrect answers. So again, you're approaching the learning 2 different times in 2 different ways, sending the message that students own their own education. Peer evaluation before submission. This is huge. 1-minute papers. Huge. To find out what students are worried about, what students don't understand. I always find it's also useful when I share my struggles. Okay, you thought you would write this paper the night before it was due? Let me tell you. The first article I published, I revised about 25 times before I submitted it, and then I revised it again after I got comments 2 more times. We all have our struggles. So we've gotten through just a tiny bit of the list of 10, but my time is up. So that you have at least a few minutes to ask questions. So, I mean, I love talking about teaching. So if you want to ever follow up with me, my email address is N for Naomi, Norman for Norman, @uga.edu. Questions, comments, reflections, disagreements?